A high-stakes diplomatic summit between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin is set to take place in Alaska, marking what could be the most consequential meeting for the future of Europe since World War II. The unconventional nature of this summit has left European officials scrambling to understand what exactly has been offered by the Kremlin, as this critical meeting lacks the months of diplomatic preparation that would typically precede such an event. President Trump has outlined his direct approach to ending the Ukraine conflict, stating he will tell Putin that he must end this war. Trump maintains that the war would have never happened under his presidency and has criticized the Biden administration's handling of the situation.
War II. So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it. And he wasn't going to mess with me. This war would have never happened. You know, we had a discussion about it one time, and we never had that discussion again. Would have never happened. And when the election was rigged, and then Biden took office, which was barely took office, the auto pen took office, bad things started happening. Bad things, stupid things were said. And it ended up in a war. And you know, and I don't believe this will happen anymore because I have that pretty well covered. This could end up in a third world war. This could have been a third world war. I don't think that's going to happen now. But I thought it was very respectful that the president of Russia is coming to our country as opposed to us going to his country or even a third-party place. But I think we'll have constructive conversations. Then after that meeting, immediately, maybe as I'm flying out, maybe as I'm leaving the room, I'll be calling the European leaders who I get along with very well. And, you know, I have a great relationship, I think, with all of them. And I get along with Zelensky, but, you know, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened, wouldn't have happened. But I'll be speaking to Zelensky. The next meeting will be with Zelensky and Putin, or Zelensky and Putin and me. I'll be there if they need. But I want to have a meeting set up between the two leaders.
Republican Congressman Don Bacon has issued a stark warning about the negotiations, drawing parallels to the Munich Agreement of 1938.
He should not be offering land for peace, Ukrainian land, and he should have President Zelensky at the table. You know, it's too reminiscent of 1938 when the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the leader of France met with Hitler and, you know, gave away Sudetenland of Czechoslovakia, and it came back so they had peace at our time. We don't want that. Any negotiation has to have Zelensky at the table, and we have to force Putin to agree to that. He doesn't want to have Zelensky at the table. He doesn't want people to see Ukraine as an equal to Russia, or Zelensky is an equal leader to Putin. And so that vision or that image is something he does not want. But we can't be giving concessions to Russia and rewarding an invasion, bombing cities, committing all these war crimes that Putin has done. And so I hope we see a Trump that we've seen in the last month, not the President Trump that we've seen the first 7 or 8 months of his presidency, where I thought he was way too weak on Putin.
He cautions President Trump against offering Ukrainian territory for peace without President Zelensky present at the negotiating table, emphasizing that any negotiations must include Ukraine's leadership and not reward Russia's invasion and war crimes. The territorial implications of any potential peace deal are becoming clearer. Trump has discussed the possibility of land swapping between Russia and Ukraine, revealing that Russia has occupied what he calls prime territory, including most of its 1,000 miles of ocean access.
Approval to do a land swap, because there'll be some land swapping going on. I know that through Russia and through conversations with everybody, to the good, for the good of Ukraine. Good stuff, not bad stuff. Also, some bad stuff for both. So there's good and there's bad. But it's very complex because you have lines that are very uneven. And there'll be some swapping, there'll be some changes in land. And the word that they will use is, you know, they make changes. We're going to change the lines, the battle lines. Russia's occupied a big portion of Ukraine. They've occupied some very prime territory. We're going to try and get some of that territory back for Ukraine. But they've taken some very prime territory. They've taken largely ocean, you know, in real estate we call it oceanfront property. That's always the most valuable property. If you're in a lake, a river, or an ocean, it's always the best property. Well, Ukraine. A lot of people don't know that Ukraine was largely.
Ukraine has lost significant coastal territory, retaining control only of the port city of Odessa. European leaders are expressing deep concern about being sidelined in these crucial negotiations. Germany's chancellor has stressed that achieving sustainable and just peace is only conceivable with Ukraine's participation, stating it would be completely out of the question to achieve this goal over the heads of Ukrainians. Poland's prime minister has warned that the seizure of Ukrainian territories must not be allowed, emphasizing that Ukraine must be included in any peace negotiations.
And for the German Chancellor confirmed that Friedrich Merz had spoken to President Trump and stressed that Germany expects Kyiv to be included in any negotiations.
The Chancellor expressed his hopes for the talks that we are clearly committed to involving the Ukrainians in this process, because the goal is to truly achieve a sustainable and just peace that is only conceivable with Ukraine. It's completely out of the question to achieve this goal over the heads of Ukrainians.
Meanwhile, Poland's Prime Minister said that the seizure of Ukrainian territories as part of any peace deal must not be allowed.
Vice President J.D. Vance has revealed that the administration has been working aggressively for 6 months to break the diplomatic logjam. He notes that over 1 million soldiers have died in this conflict.
For over 3 years at this point, well over 1 million Russians and Ukrainian dead soldiers. And as the president says, the numbers are probably much higher than the official tally indicates. There has been no substantial breakthrough. And for 6 months, the president himself, he's asked me, he's asked Secretary Rubio, of course, Steve Witkoff. We have been aggressively working, trying to break the logjam. One of the most important logjams is that Vladimir Putin said that he would never sit down with Zelensky, the head of Ukraine, and the president has now got that to change. We're at a point now where we're now trying to figure out, frankly, scheduling and things like that around when these three leaders could sit down and discuss an end to this conflict. Now, what do I think is ultimately going to come out of this? Look, it's actually very simple. If you take where the current line of contact between Russia and Ukraine is, we're going to try to find some negotiated settlement that the Ukrainians and the Russians can live with, where they can live in relative peace, where the killing stops. It's not going to make anybody super happy. Both the Russians and the Ukrainians probably at the end of the day are going to be unhappy with it. But I don't think you can actually sit down and have this negotiation absent the leadership of Donald J. Trump. And the president said this to me today privately, said, look, maybe this works out, maybe it doesn't, but it's worth the effort, it's worth trying, and we're going to keep on using the diplomatic influence of the President of the United States to accomplish an end to this conflict. And Maria, you know this, but other people may not. If you look at the president's foreign policy accomplishments, if you look at Congo, Rwanda, a war that went on for 30 years, killed 6 million people, if you look at the number of hostages in Israel, in Gaza, who have been released and gone back to their families, if you look at Malaysia, Cambodia, you look at all of these terrible conflicts, the president has shown a willingness to be the president of peace. It's a big, big testament to the quality of American leadership. And it's an amazing thing to have a president who's working to stop the killing when you've had for so many generations presidents who didn't care about bringing peace to these very conflict-torn regions of the world. It's something I think all Americans should be proud of, whatever their political party.
And emphasizes that while any settlement may not make everyone completely satisfied, the primary goal is to stop the killing and achieve relative peace between Russia and Ukraine. The administration's stance on continued financial support for Ukraine has become increasingly clear. In a controversial statement, Vice President Vance declared that America is done with the funding of the Ukraine war business.
I think the president and I certainly think that America, we're done with the funding of the Ukraine war business. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement to this thing. We want to stop the killing. But Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict.
What did you make of that?
I think he's wrong. First of all, I take offense when he says we're tired of sending money to the Ukrainian war business, something like that. This is not the Ukrainian war business. This is the Russian invading Ukraine, an innocent sovereign country. That's the war we're in. This isn't Ukraine's war. This is Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And he seems to not have the moral clarity to see that. And it bothers me. And by the way, 2 out of 3 Americans support Ukraine. These guys are taking a political stand that most Americans disagree with. I wish our leadership in the White House stood tall on principle. We're the land of the free. We're the defenders of freedom. America is that bright light on the hill, and we should act that way. Trying to treat Ukraine and Russia as equals when one country is actually invading the other, that's a failure. So I'd like to see moral clarity out of our vice president on this. And I think he's standing with 1/3 of Americans, not the 2/3 in this.
This prompted immediate pushback from Congressman Bacon, who corrected that this is not Ukraine's war, but Russia's invasion, criticizing the administration's lack of moral clarity and noting that 2/3 of Americans continue to support Ukraine. Trump's diplomatic strategy involves meeting with Putin first, then immediately calling European leaders and President Zelensky to arrange subsequent meetings between the warring parties. He has emphasized his desire for an immediate ceasefire and has mentioned the possibility of using economic pressure on Russia, including threatening 50% tariffs on countries that continue buying Russian oil. The rushed nature of these negotiations has raised concerns among diplomatic experts who note that such high-stakes meetings typically require extensive preparation and clear objectives agreed upon by all allies. The absence of Ukraine from the initial talks and the sidelining of European partners represents a significant departure from traditional diplomatic protocols. As the Alaska summit approaches, the international community watches with a mixture of hope for peace and concern about the terms that might be imposed. The outcome of these talks could reshape the European security architecture for generations to come, making this one of the most critical diplomatic moments in recent history.